Hey everyone, today we're going to be doing something a little bit different. I decided it would be a good idea to do a D&D tier list video, just to sort of bridge the time between my upload schedule. So today I'm going to be discussing all the different classes in D&D, and where I think they sit on a current 5th edition meta. Everything that I'm about to discuss in this video is my own opinion, and I just hope that you can bear with me, and if you agree, that's great. If you disagree, feel free to comment down below, and I'll try and get to you, so I can comment and maybe give my own opinions on the facts. So, let's begin. Alright, Fighter. Fighter is pretty interesting. The class itself has a lot of multi-classing potential because it's just so generic and multifunctional. Like, you can build Fighter, you can go into essentially any other class in D&D, and it'll still be relevant if you put a few class levels into it. So I'm gonna put Fighter in A tier because it starts actually with Constitution saving throw proficiencies, which is really good. Constitution is one of the most frequently rolled saving throws in D&D, so having that is great. A lot of really good starting abilities. I think Action Surge and Second Wind are really close to the first and second level skill trees, so really good in that regard. Good for multi-classing, but pretty generic outside of that field set. If you're going completely Fighter, you may find yourself a little bit lackluster if you don't multi-class, but it's a good base class in general, and really good for players starting off in Dungeons & Dragons. Alright, Warlock. There's a few problems regarding Warlock in the fact that they're not as great of a casters as Sorcerers, Wizards, Druids, those types of guys. The problem that spans from Warlock is the fact that they have a very limited number of spell slots, and it's almost mandatory to take short rests in between those uses. Eldritch invocations are great, and they help Eldritch Blast. You can also go into Eldritch Sword too, but that's a completely separate subject. There's a lot of customizability with Eldritch Blast, and it's essentially a Warlock's auto attack to an extent, but I feel like all of the customization that comes from Eldritch invocations doesn't really make Eldritch Blast a very customizable spell. You'd think that you could go a little bit more in-depth, like Sorcerer and Wizard have a lot of different ways that you can go to make them unique to your own specific desires. But when it comes to Eldritch Blast, you only have a set few Eldritch invocations that you can take regarding that. I'm pretty sure they get Charisma saving throw proficiencies too. Not bad. I'm gonna put Warlock in the B tier. It's a pretty average caster, a bit lower. I wouldn't want to put it in C tier because it's not that bad, but just a bit generic, a bit lower than generic. Okay, Paladin. Paladin is a really good class. The ability to heal with Lay on Hands for 1 health is essentially better than a lot of different healing casters' abilities, because if you heal someone for, I don't know, a D8 for a Cleric's Cure Wounds, they're gonna heal and they're gonna get a little bit of health, but they're still at a threshold that they're going to get hit one more time and fall down anyway. So Lay on Hands is a really good ability. I would place it in the A tier, but I think Paladin deserves S tier. Auras are super good. The more players that you have in your party, the better the auras get. Having saving throws to essentially every type in D&D, every ability score is crazy, and the branches that come from the Paladin subclasses are equally as good, getting different auras for different situations. The Paladin Oath is unique as well. Some oaths can be harder to keep than others, but aside from that, Paladin is a really good frontliner, a really good healer. The one downside of it that might put it in A tier, but I think it still deserves S tier, is that Paladins really need to spread themselves thin when it comes to ability scores. Most likely going into Strength or Dex for their weapon attacks, having to dip into Charisma, which is nice because they're a Charisma spellcaster, which is good for roleplay. But they have to dip in it for the first part for their spells, and Constitution if they want to be able to concentrate on their smites, their other abilities, and if they just want to have enough health in general. So they have to spread themselves thin, but higher level characters can easily accommodate that, and I think Paladin deserves S tier for its viability. Alright, Ranger. Ranger is a difficult subject, and I wouldn't want to put it too low on the list because I think Ranger has a lot of uniqueness and personality to the actual class. but it's definitely lacking in a few regards, and I'll discuss that in a second. Now, it's a mix between a fighter, a bit of a rogue, and a bit of a druid. So just by picking up this class, you're essentially already multi-classing, which is really good. The spells are unique to a ranger in the sense that they get a lot of spells that go in the regards of arrows and ranged weaponry, abilities regarding to stealth, tracking, and just general combat prowess. I'm feeling like it belongs in the C tier, however, and that's because of a few downsides. That's because Ranger spreads itself a bit too thin in that regard. The multi-classing off just in the base levels is really good. However, the downside of it comes with the fact that it spreads itself too thin. Now, because you're going into both fighter, rogue, and druid in a single class, that's good. You're essentially getting 3 different sets of perks from a single class. But the problem comes from the fact that all of the skills that come from that are just essentially worse versions of the other 3 classes. Multi-classing normally would probably be better than picking Ranger. Now, another bad thing about Ranger is that the default Ranger has a lot of skills that are just plain bad. They have a lot of skills that really break the roleplay opportunity for the characters. An ability to not get lost breaks the ability to get lost and have getting lost encounters. I wouldn't say it's bad, but you're just losing that opportunity. Like, that breaks a bit of the fun role-playing opportunities from that. Moving faster when you travel isn't incredibly necessary. It might be important on time-sensitive missions, but aside from that, you'll probably forget you even have the skill when it's time for you to use it. Foraging, that was never an issue. Not really an issue, depending on what campaign setting you're playing in. So, Ranger, it's unique. It's a good multi-classing single class, but a lot of its abilities are a bit too specific for Dungeons & Dragons in general. Revised Ranger is there, but I'm not covering that one. Right now, my opinion, Ranger's in C tier. Okay, Bard. What makes Bards unique is the fact that they are usually always considered the face of the party. And because of that, they come with a lot of unique skills. They eventually get expertise to help them in ability checks, which is essential for any face, and spellcasting at level 1 is incredibly good when it comes to role-playing opportunities as well. Bard is great in counter charm, getting charisma saving throws is incredible. I'm pretty sure they get charisma saving throws. What else? They're really good when it comes to backline healing, backline support, concentrating on skills that the Paladin or maybe the Wizard don't want to currently have to focus on. Being able to dip very consistently without hurting their build too much. A few downsides regarding the fact that Counter Charm with your music and Song of Rest are a little bit forgettable in the sense that they're a bit underwhelming. An overall good class, I'm going to put it in B tier for its general usefulness and its ability to dip into charisma very seamlessly, working with other charisma-based casters. Paladin in general is a good sync, but yeah, B tier. Barbarian. Alright, I have a lot of good things to say about Barbarian as a class. It's really strength-oriented. Rage sort of works off of strength. And strength as an ability score is a really good one to have. Now, strength is good in combat because a lot of the stronger weapons in Dungeons & Dragons sort of work off of strength. But aside from that, strength is also really good for role-playing opportunities. Picking things up, helping out with like handiwork, stuff like that. Rage giving a advantage on ability scores like that, ability checks I mean, is really, really good. And Rage being used outside of combat, although you don't see it too often because a lot of people see Barbarian's Rage as a combat skill, it can be really good when it comes to rolling with advantage, especially if you don't have a Bard or a Cleric to buff you up with ability checks. Aside from that, combat-wise, which is the main focus of Barbarian, Rage essentially halves a lot of the most common damage in Dungeons & Dragons, and a specific subclass of Barbarian allows you to half the majority of damage types in Dungeons & Dragons. An overall essential frontliner, rivaling Paladin and Fighter for top tier. not much else to say. Downsides being, just like Paladin, you have to spread yourself thin, with dexterity, constitution, and strength being your main focuses. Barbarian is a little bit harder to spec into multi-classing as other classes because it's so strength-oriented. Rage working off of strength, ever so slightly. And just generally, not being able to concentrate on spells while you're raging loses all of the potential for you to buff yourself up with a little multi-class in Spellcaster. So, Barbarian, I'm going to put it in A tier, maybe a little bit above A tier, probably halfway between A and S. And that's because I think Barbarians as a class, they have a lot more features that are more focused and toned towards fighting, as opposed to fighters, which are a little bit more generic in the sense that they work more towards multi-classing. Barbarians are a unique sort of single class. Multi-classing is possible, but personally I wouldn't recommend it. Okay, Monk. Monk is a difficult one for me, and that's because I haven't played this one officially, but I've had a lot of players in campaigns who have, and I've been able to sort of watch them and see their struggles with the class, what makes them good, what makes them bad. Now, Monk is great because unarmed strikes allow you to have more attacks than any other fighting class in the game at the lowest level. Unarmed strikes are very potent when you're able to punch twice with them, even more potent when you use key features to attack more times. Really good in that regard. Monks do not need armor, I'm pretty sure, to get a lot of their abilities. That's good and bad to an extent. Monks also, for the most part, don't need weapons. They can use weapons, but they don't particularly need them. Now, this is good and bad as well, because not having weapons or armor, just like Barbarian's case, not being able to wear armor, it comes with the drawback that you will never be able to wear magically enhanced armor or use most of the magically enhanced weapons, which puts Monk at a disadvantage. Monk stays pretty generic for the majority of the game, its class features a bit unique, and its subclasses very unique. However, Monk just being a generalized fighter in comparison, not so much multi-class potential from fighter, I'm gonna put Monk in the lower B tier, just for those reasons. Now, Artificer. There's not enough information regarding around Artificer right now. For all I know, Wizards of the Coast could change something, and I could be none the wiser. I've only had one player up until now who's even played Artificer, at least for the rules that are out right now, so I don't have enough information to really judge this class right now. I'm going to put it at B tier, but if you want my early opinion and my very rash opinion, I feel like being able to craft magical items is really potent, and having those at earlier stages of the game is really good, so yeah, B tier. Okay, Cleric. Cleric has a lot of abilities that make it similar to Paladin in extent and similar to Bard. Now, the problem with Cleric being that it's not really the class that you would expect to be the face, it's also not the class that you'd expect to be the fighter. Cleric sits somewhere in between, and I'm going to give Cleric A tier just because of that. What I feel Cleric is good at is consistent heals, outside of combat heals, inside of combat heals, and the utility that comes from buffing magic and overall support. Clerics can be in the front line. A lot of cleric subclasses have proficiency in higher tiers of armor and higher tiers of weapons, but for the most part, clerics are meant to be the support caster. Now, a bit harder to be a face, a bit harder to be the frontliner. You still want a high DPS melee unit in your party for the most part, but Cleric is a bit different in that regard. What makes Clerics good is their Channel Divinity features, because Channel Divinity is incredibly powerful when it comes to taking out large swarms of undead, more particularly lower swarms of undead minions. And if that's not the case, Channel Divinity allows you to channel whatever domain you are as a cleric, which allows you to use it outside of just skeleton and zombie murder. Now, another great thing about Cleric is that at level 10, which is pretty low in the leveling system. Clerics get the ability Divine Intervention, which is essentially a miniature wish. And based on the leniency of your DM, you could more or less gain the ability Wish off of this. Based on the DM, definitely. So, Clerics, an interesting class for sure. They have healing potential, damage potential. They have a lot of potential. And I'm putting them in A tier just because of all of that potential. Alright, Druid. Druid, personally, I haven't played this one either, but I've done so much research on the Druid class that I am very comfortable saying that this is a much higher tier class than a lot of people probably lead on it to be. Druid is a top tier stealther. When you have your rogue who's only able to roll stealth, the druid can technically turn into an animal and everyone would be none the wiser. Unless these people are high level entities that can somehow see through polymorphs and animal feature abilities, the druid is essentially always stealthed when they're in their animal form. Spells just assist in that, polymorph being able to turn you into powerful creatures, temporary hit points coming from the animal abilities is really strong, and you very rarely need to actually use spell slots to get the job done. I'm a little bit, what would it be? I'm not too well read on the subclasses of Druid, but I feel like they would enhance these natural traits even more. I'm going to put Druid in the A tier because I feel like it's definitely better than Warlock to an extent when it comes to spells, and Druids, strangely enough, have really good frontline potential, be it on their own or with a multi-class into a more fighting style class. So Druid gets an A tier in my regard. Okay, Sorcerer. I really like this class, but the problem is, just like a few of these, I also have never played it. A lot of players in my games also prefer Wizard over Sorcerer, and there's a good reason for that. Mostly the stigma around MMORPGs and how Wizard is just a generally more well-known class than Sorcerer. Sorcerer still having its perks that bring it up in better regards to Wizard, some a bit lower, but let me see. Now, Sorcerer, its best ability, personally, for me, is Metamagic. Metamagic, in my opinion, is better than Warlocks in Eldritch Invocation, in the sense that it really makes you feel like you have a lot of control over your spells. You don't need to spec into a specific tree of magic, so invocation, abjuration, stuff like that. Your magic is generally good, and you can mold your magic to be generally anything, based on the limits of Metamagic. Another thing that's interesting that some people might not know is sorcerers get an extra cantrip than wizards, which is pretty good. Cantrips being the types of spells that you can cast over and over, you could imagine how good that could be at the beginning of the game. I'm not sure if it evens out a little bit later. My knowledge on that is a little bit low, but starting off with one extra cantrip can be pretty good at the beginning of the game, considering the lack of spell slots. And yeah, now the subclasses are neat, but the problem that the subclasses have for sorcerers is that they don't relate too closely to the actual spells of the sorcerer. Rather, they give innate abilities that stem from the sorcerer's origins. It's good, it's unique, but it's a little bit weaker as opposed to the multitude of subclasses that a wizard has. I'm putting sorcerer at an A tier. I'm gonna say it's strangely on par with the rest of these in a caster standpoint. I don't really have an opinion on if it'd be lower or higher. It fits pretty well in the A tier. Alright, my favorite class, Rogue. I like Rogue, but I never technically go complete Rogue because I really like the fact that Rogue has a lot of multi-classing potential. Another really great thing that Rogue has is its expertise at level 1, which is great because bards do not get expertise at level 1, rather they get utility-based spells. Rogue allowing you to get expertise makes it a really good class to spec into at least one level just to be a little bit better in whatever ability score is up to your liking. If you want to spec more levels into Rogue, it just gets better, because Sneak Attack will essentially help any frontline fighter so long as they can get themselves advantage or an ally close to them. So having 2 front lines up in the front could be really good when it comes to taking down people and proccing Sneak Attack. Getting the uncanny ability to take bonus actions to dash, disengage, and hide is really, really good, because a lot of times casters and fighters do not get bonus actions at the beginning of the game, and they have to work into abilities to grab them. Meanwhile, Rogue gives you an uncanny amount of abilities in movement and bonus actions to use skills. That can be really good. The subclasses just improve that just because of this crazy amount of potential. I'm going to put Rogue in S tier. I have honestly never gone a D&D character without going at least 1 level in Rogue. I'm not going to go too far into that, but you sort of see how you can build your character around having a level in Rogue, and more if you see fit. Alright, last but not least, Wizard, my personal favorite class in D&D. I think I said that Rogue was also really good and high up on my list, just generally because I pick it up so much, but what I like the most is the Wizard-Rogue build together. That reason being that Wizard is a really good, really generic, and really well-known class. If you've ever played an MMO RPG, you know firsthand that Wizard is the standpoint. It's the general caster. Sorcerer is a little bit less well known, but wizards and sorcerers have a lot in common. Wizards not having sorceress origins, relying completely on intelligence, makes them a little bit weaker when it comes to the roleplay aspect because they don't use charisma for their spellcasting. However, they are able to spec into a certain arcane tradition. Those traditions being a slew of different types of magic, ranging from evocation, illusion, divination, stuff like that. Wizards have the most subclasses out of any class in D&D, which gives them a lot of ability to change yourself up for the current situation or just how you're feeling when you're making your character. One thing that I forgot to mention when I rated Sorcerer 2, and probably a few other spellcasting classes, but I think Wizard and Sorcerer are the ones to get these abilities most often, is the fact that Wizards and Sorcerers can learn the spell Wish, which I'm pretty sure you get at level 17, the problem being that you probably won't make it to level 17. So the mere fact that Wish is a spell that you can get as these 2 classes makes the spell really good, makes the classes really good, the downside being that you might not ever have a chance to use them or get yourself to a high enough level. I know some of you have had the luxury of playing higher level characters. I want to know how your Wish spells worked, because as of yet I have never been able to play a wizard who knows Wish. I've tried to go Divine Intervention. My DMs have been a little lenient in that regard, which is why I prefer Cleric sometimes over Wizard. But aside from that, Wizard, really good utility class. Another thing that makes them similar to Sorcerer is their low health pool, but they make it up in their general ability to flex into different spells. Mage Armor, False Life, giving yourself the abilities that you otherwise wouldn't have with your magic is really good, makes you easy to flex into certain situations. Wizard has good multi-class potential, and because of that, I'm going to also put Wizard in the A tier. Alright guys, so that's going to be the end of this video. I hope you agree with where I put the majority of these classes. As you can see, I didn't put anything in the D tier because I think for the most part, every class has something that makes them unique, and none of them particularly are bad in any regard. Ranger being the lowest on this list, but I think with a little bit of extra flavor and a bit of help from the DM, maybe using Revised Ranger as a supplement, you could really make Ranger a more unique class than it already is. The rest of the classes being incredibly unique in their own regard, multi-classing for sure, and subclassing can really make some of these lower tier classes better in some regards. But in general, this is how I feel about the base classes and a few of their features. So if you guys agree, feel free to comment down below your opinions on the list, and I would be really curious to know how you feel about the ordering. So hope you guys enjoyed. Next animation coming out real soon, so stay tuned for it, and I'll see you guys in the next video.